This is Heather Stephen, and you're listening to Pieces to Peace, Anchoring on the Other Side of Grief. This podcast focuses on people who have emerged from the depths of their grief, their transition from surviving the darkest of days to seeing the light again. Through my own experiences of grief, I have learned how healing it is to know that I am not alone. My hope is that those seeking comfort and relief will find some here and leave feeling reassured that there is life again. There are brighter days ahead, just around the corner. Jenedy, I'm so excited to have you. Woohoo!
Thanks for having me, Heather.
Yeah, thanks for agreeing to this. I know you're so busy and hence why you're working while we're going to do our little discussion. Just
All moms
excited
know about
though.
multitasking. That's right.
I love it. I mean, we have to. We're so, we're that type of, I don't know, breed. So can you give us just a little background about who you are before we jump into your story? Like, where do you come from? Who are you?
Well, I'm a painter. I'm an oil painter professionally. Mom, had 4 kids. I have lived all over the Western United States. So when people ask me where I'm from, I always say like the Western United States because I've lived just in about every state over here on the west side. I currently live in Utah. I am also an athlete. I wasn't one growing up, but I am one now. It's so hard for me to say that. I have to say to people, I guess I'm an athlete. I don't know, but I am.
I love it. I love it.
So I coach at a ninja gym. I coach 4 classes a week. Yeah, so between coaching, being a mom, and being a full-time painter, that pretty much fills up all my time.
Yeah. Where do you fit all that in when you're doing then you were doing like some painting workshops this summer too?
Oh yeah. I teach in my studio a couple times a year and then I teach online. How do I fit it in? Well, it's funny. I was just on a different podcast earlier this week and she asked me about balance and I was like, I have no balance. Balance is a lie.
Only as an athlete, I hope, but
it's like it's kind of like, you do what you have to do that day. And I kind of feel like with my family, let me say this, in ninja, there's a lot of balance obstacles. And when you're learning balance, sometimes it looks like these big movements, like, whoa, too far left, oh, too far right. And then other times it's like these small movements. And I feel like the balance of my life is a lot like that. Like it's summer, so my kids are home. And so it's been a little more challenging, but I'll teach for a whole week and I'm not home a whole lot. And then I'll take my kids for a week to California and I'm with them like a whole lot. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like that kind of big bouncy stuff. But then during the school year, it's like, I get up early. I coach a class at like 6 in the morning and then I'm home by like 7:30 to get my kids off to school. And then I'm in the studio painting, so it's, but this is the thing is it's like, it's totally always, you always have to be so flexible and be willing to like readjust your schedule. Because like during the school year, I love going to bed at 9 and waking up at 4 and coming to my studio really early to paint. But that doesn't work in the summer because, first of all, in Utah, the sun's up till like 10 o'clock at night. And then my kids don't want to go to bed before 10 because it's still light outside.
Right.
And so then it's like, okay, well, then I can't wake up. Then I have to sleep until 5, because I have to sleep. So I feel like it's just constantly like, you just have to constantly be kind of reinventing your schedule and finding out, okay, well, this shift just happened in my life. Okay, so now how are we going to make it work,
Yeah, and I love that. I love that flexibility attitude for sure. Okay, anything else that we need to know about Jenedy?
I like to wake up early, but I guess we already established that.
Okay. Yeah, so this is probably late for you.
It is. Also, I really like to write. I give recommendations to people all the time to keep a journal and their life will be better. So
okay. Yeah. So are you like, you just like to write and, keep that of your life, but do you do poetry or anything else?
We're going to show and tell.
I love it. I love
Okay,
it.
okay. Maybe I can't. Here, look like this. See this wall?
No way.
That's my journal wall.
Oh my goodness, you guys,
Going
there's like
back.
how many shelves? One, two,
Yeah.
five?
This is one, two, three. Yeah, five. This was my first
Oh,
one right here, this blue one. So I've
oh
kept a
my
journal.
goodness.
I kept a journal since I was 10, and I really believe the secret to success on so many levels in my life. This is my current edition. It looks like a pirate journal.
Oh my goodness,
So
I
yeah.
love that.
So yeah,
So,
I write.
okay, your kids are gonna love that one day. Your posterity
Maybe.
actually will love that.
They're
That
gonna be
is
too overwhelmed. They're like, who's gonna attack the journals?
they're like, how can we digitize these?
How do who gets that
Oh
job?
man. Yeah, man. Okay. So let's talk about your story. Let's get into that
Do
nitty
you want
gritty of
my art story? Do you want my ninja story? My
I
family story?
I want
Okay. So I went to school. Oh, sorry, that's my mall stick. I went to school to be a painter. Graduated in 2006 from BYU, Idaho. Moved to Southern California with my husband, and a few years later, I became a mom. And that actually was like not super easy for me on a number of levels. One was like I was actually really scared to be a mom. It took me a couple years into marriage to be like, I'm going to get up the courage to do this thing. And
Yeah,
then
and tell me about that. What was it that you were afraid of?
I had nannied.
Right? Okay.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
just gonna say I had nannied, and I'm gonna tell you that people say this too, that like babysitting other people's kids is like way different than being a parent, and it's super true.
You
But
found that to be true.
I had spent a summer nannying, and I just remember how difficult it was and how long my days were. And I just remember thinking like, people do this like their whole lives,
And they
and
want to?
they don't get paid. They don't get paid to
Right.
do it.
They don't get much of anything in return sometimes.
Plus, I think
Oh,
also like my husband and I, we met in Southeast Idaho and went to school in Southeast Idaho. And then we moved to LA and our rent quadrupled. And
oh my goodness.
I
Yeah.
remember us being like, well, will we be able to eat food? I don't know. So we just wanted to make sure that
Oh man.
we could physically sustain ourselves before having
Yeah.
kids. So
Yeah.
anyways, so I think those two things kind of played a big role in it. But it was really
Yeah.
interesting because I feel like, and honestly, my mom had always gotten pregnant super easy. Like my mom got pregnant with birth control in place and all that. And so I guess I just always assumed that it was going to be easy for me too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so
Yeah.
I figured I would just decide that I was ready to be a parent and then it would like magically happen. It
And
didn't. It didn't. And
wow. Okay.
it was kind of interesting how God during that wait, and honestly, I don't want to like pretend like I have some crazy infertility story because I don't. It really took me only like just about a year to get pregnant. But that was a hard year for me.
Yeah.
And I painted a lot of depressing paintings during that time of
Wow.
of
Yeah.
of like the waiting. I just felt like I was just waiting and waiting. But I think
Right.
that wait was like so beautiful because I felt like God took me from, okay, I guess I'll be a parent to like, please let me be a parent.
I really want this.
My
Yeah.
prayers changed a lot over the course of that year. And
I bet. Yeah.
anyways, so then I became a mom and my first son, his name was Victory Morgan. Um,
Oh my goodness. That okay.
and
Where did you come up with that?
so I guess I always loved the name Morgan. And my husband had this best friend in college whose name was Morgan. And he was the most like charismatic, happy, enthusiastic guy. And
Wow.
I remember telling my husband, like, we should have a son and name him Morgan. And like, no one will be more excited about it than Morgan.
Right. Right. Of course.
And
Oh,
then
that's
my
cool.
husband's name is Victor.
Oh,
And,
okay. Okay.
and like, he was actually named after both of his parents. so we were planning on like carrying on the tradition of like passing the family name. And I was like, but what if we just took your name and we made it just a little bit cooler? And honestly, I always call my husband Victory. It was just like, I
Do
still do.
you? Oh,
Yeah.
that's
And
so
so,
cute.
so we actually just named him Victory after his dad.
I love
So jumping into motherhood was really difficult, you know.
that.
I think, I
Uh-huh.
mean, I don't know. This is the thing. I've learned that like there's different range of talents and abilities when it comes to motherhood, you know? And like
Wholeheartedly agree.
I'm like your mom that's like going to take you on adventures and we're going to play outside a lot and all this stuff. But the baby phase was not my favorite. It was
Me
not my
either.
favorite.
I can
Yeah.
relate to that. Uh-huh.
And
Yep.
I actually had this like really incredible experience though when my son, I think he was about 3 months old, and it had been about 3 months since I had painted. And at the time we were just living in this tiny house. And so like our front room was my studio. Like we didn't have a family room. We just had like a studio. Like
Yep.
people walk in, it's like, there's an easel, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember just being in my front room and looking at my easel, and I've got this little baby who's like crying and I don't know why. And being like super frustrated. Like I fed him, we burped him, we changed him, and yet something was still wrong, and I was tired and I wanted to go to bed. And I looked at my easel and I was like, and I haven't painted in 3 months. And like in this little brief moment, I had this like little piece of resentment, right, for this tiny little baby that I'm holding.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then like in that moment, I just felt this like this censure from heaven that was like, excuse me, kind of like, this is the most important thing that you'll ever do, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And it was interesting because I had taken a C.S. Lewis course when I was in college, and I still consider C.S. Lewis like one of the best spiritual writers ever. And one
So
thing that
agree with
he's,
that.
yeah, like at the end of Mere Christianity, it's like you could get a copy of Mere Christianity, turn to the very last page, the last paragraph, and C.S. Lewis talks about sacrifice. And he says that there must be a whole giving up of the self, that you must submit like to death of all of your favorite ambitions and death of the whole self in the end. And nothing within you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. And I remember reading that in college and being
Wow.
like, but death of all my ambitions. But what if my ambitions are to like paint inspirational paintings for Jesus? What if my ambition is to help other people? Like, why would I have to submit that, But then I'm
Right. Right.
there, I'm there at 3 a.m. with a crying baby, and God brought that quote back to my mind, and I was like, I get it. You want me,
Wow.
you want me to give this up. And so I did. I let go of painting, and I did a painting, oddly enough, to commemorate the letting go. It's like a really
Did you?
depressing self-portrait where
No way.
I'm just like standing there with my head bowed and my hair's long, so my long hair is kind of in my face, and my hands are just like open by my sides, and it was just me like releasing my ambitions of being a great painter. And
Wow.
I'm so thankful for that lesson because
Yeah.
I didn't know the future, and I didn't know how important that message was for me at the time, but I let go of painting and focused on being a mom. But then guess what happened? Like 6 months later, my son had developed a sleep schedule. And
Oh,
then,
right. One of
yes,
those.
the blessed sleep
Right.
schedule. He was actually
Yes.
taking naps like on the regular. And so I ran back to my easel, and I didn't do dishes or laundry or anything while he was sleeping. It was kind of like, if your kid's asleep, you're at your easel. And
Right. Okay.
then everything else you're going to figure out to do with him while he's awake.
So
Um,
did you grieve that at all? Like walking away from painting, or did you know that you'd get back to it someday?
oh, I figured I would. I didn't know when. I
Okay.
didn't know it was going to be
Right.
like six
So
months later.
soon. Yeah. Yeah.
But I will say it wasn't a total just like, oh, and now you have it back. Because I was watching all of the boys that I went to college with, and they were just like taking off in their careers. And I felt so behind, right? And I felt like, so in a way, I still had to sacrifice that ambition. It didn't mean that I
Yes.
couldn't paint every day, but it meant like you're not going to have a career maybe for like
Yet.
10 years.
Right.
But
Yep.
I told myself, okay, we're not going to be able to have like a full on career for a while, but we can paint when we can. And the goal was to just paint a little bit every day so that I got better. So that the plan was like when my kids are all in school, I'll have the skill set to like hit the ground running with a career instead of just like
Yeah.
not painting at all and like just being a mom. Then you have to like refigure out how to paint 10 years later, you
Right.
know?
Okay.
And
Yep. Yep.
so once my son started sleeping, that was my goal. And like talk about flexibility, sometimes you have this minute to paint, like you gingerly place your baby in his crib and then you walk away and then like you just barely get started and you just
Uh-huh.
barely go to put your brush and it's like you hear him crying and you're like,
Yep. Oh,
or even
yes.
fast
Yes.
forward to when I had since 4 kids and you're getting up at 4 in the morning to paint. And then literally your 3-year-old walks down the stairs at 5 a.m. and you're like,
Are you kidding me
go
right
back to
now?
bed, go back to bed.
Yes, please.
It's like they knew I was awake. It's like my
Right.
kids had these like little sensors that was like, mom's awake, I can be awake.
Yep. Totally out
Anyway,
to get
so
you.
so
Yep.
it's been it like from the start, it's been a crazy juggle of, but I just was like, hey, if you got 15 minutes, take it. Because there's a hesitation to be like, you only have 15 minutes. Are you even going to do anything in 15 minutes? Like, might as well watch cat videos on YouTube because you only have 15 minutes, you
Right.
know?
Oh
But
my gosh. Yes.
the truth is like, I have become the biggest advocate of seizing the small moments, like, because you think they don't matter, but they do. Like, literally, I built a career in all the small moments, you know? Okay.
Yeah.
So I
I
have that
love that.
lesson. I had Victory Morgan. 2 years later, I had Benson True. And so I had these
Oh
two
my
little
goodness.
boys. And then my husband got into grad school in Arizona, in Tucson.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So he went to the U of A and studied entrepreneurship. And we moved in with my parents because that's how you afford grad school.
Do they
And
still
they
live
had
there?
No, they've since moved like 3 times.
Oh, okay.
My parents are not stationary people, but
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
they lived in, actually it was called Vail, Arizona. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yep.
Vail, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
it's it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the boondocks of Tucson. So
Yep. Yep.
we moved in with them and they had a pool. And my mom was like, "Oh, Jen, like I'm so nervous about the pool and you've got these two little boys." My boys were like brand spanking new and 2 years old when we moved in with them. And
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's okay. Like my mom had this yard that was like an acre and it had a pond and a pool. So there were two bodies of water. But
Right.
so she fenced off everything, like her whole patio, it's like you couldn't even
Mm-hmm.
access the backyard. And we figured it's gonna be fine. And it was fine for like a year. And then yeah, like one morning just doesn't, I've learned that you can have all the precautions set up, but at the end of the day you still got a body of water. And we're not
Right.
entirely sure what happened, but his bike was in the pool with him. So I'm pretty sure he was like riding his trike around the pool because
Oh,
Gates got, you know what I mean? It's like
yeah.
perfect storm arises and somehow he got back there and somehow he ended up in the pool and we
Oh,
did CPR and then he was resuscitated and life flighted and
okay.
yeah.
So
And
he
then we,
hadn't been in the pool very long when you were able to resuscitate, or what? You said you woke up and you found him in the pool.
no, I didn't wake up.
So,
I didn't wake up and find him in
okay.
the pool. No,
Oh, okay.
I was feeding his brother breakfast
Okay.
and I had let him go play on the patio. Like my mom had this fenced in patio. And
Okay.
then, not very much time had passed and my mom was working in the yard and she comes in and I was like, "Hey, did you see Morgan on the porch?" And she was like, "No." And then you just run to the pool. Like that's what you do.
Yep. Yep. And that's where you
And
found him.
honestly,
Okay.
time-wise, like it couldn't have been that long because the last thing he did was come inside and ask for a frozen Go-Gurt. You know, like you put the Go-Gurts in the freezer and they turn into
Yep.
little popsicles. I'd given
Yep.
him one of those, and I remember when the paramedics were there, I found it and it was still like frozen. Like it was still on the patio cold.
Right.
So that just tells you like, I mean, if you're in Arizona and your Go-Gurt is still frozen, it's just been minutes. And the thing is that like with drownings, like it's always just, it's minutes, it's seconds. It's just this little flash of time,
Wow.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then we're driving, like they didn't let me go in the helicopter. And I'm driving with my husband to the Tucson Medical Center. And you're just thinking like, how is this even happening? You know, like how is this even
Yeah.
real?
Right. Like a dream.
And then we spent 7 weeks there. And I remember after like 2 weeks thinking like, oh, he's for sure coming home, for sure, you know, because
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
wasn't on life support and his heart was great. His lungs actually looked really good. And so I,
Really?
yeah.
So
And
the problem was brain issues. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it was
Yep.
lack of oxygen to the brain.
Yep. So you knew
So
if he was
he,
coming home, it was going to be a lot different, though. Like
yes.
he would not be
So
the
what
same.
happened was like, so they had him intubated for a week just to try to give him, you know, they put him in a medically induced coma for a week just
Okay.
to try to give him like all the chance to just heal. And then I remember the day that they were going to essentially like wake him up and take out the breathing tube and let him breathe on his own. In my head, I was picturing him just like waking up and being like, Mom, I fell in the pool. Like, let's go
Yeah.
home. Like that's what I was anticipating.
Yeah.
And instead started storming almost immediately. So, you
Okay.
know, I
Explain
think,
that. Explain
yeah,
storming.
so most people I know aren't aware, but in near drowning victims, there's a fairly common thing called sympathetic storming. And it's when
Okay.
you've damaged your basal ganglia and the fight or fight response in our bodies,
Uh-huh.
which is your sympathetic nervous system, it goes kind of crazy. And it kind of looks like a seizure because all of the muscles in your body flex. They all
Oh,
go like
okay.
this. And then
Yep.
like your heart rate goes really high, your breathing goes really high, and it looks like really physically exhausting. And the storms, they said, was kind of like the brain trying to reset itself, kind of like a reboot. And they had actually, there's people that are kids too that had like nearly drowned. They go through a period of like sympathetic storming and then they kind of come out of it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So so I was like, okay, like we're resetting. It's cool. Like we can get through
Yeah.
this. And I still had all this hope for like a complete recovery on the other side.
Okay.
Because he was
Mm-hmm.
only 3. I mean, he was just a toddler, you know, and
Yeah.
toddlers are amazing and like super resilient, you know.
Very much so. Yes.
So that was like my hope. And when it started, like the sympathetic storms were just like 20 minutes. And so he'd have like a storm and then he'd just like pass out in exhaustion. And then in time they grew to be 48 hours. And
Long?
yeah. So you're
Oh
just
my
standing
goodness.
there for 2 days watching your son.
Wow.
And it's like all through the night and there's like nothing you can do. And there's no, they would try morphine and Valium and like all these crazy narcotics to try to like to stop it. But like
Right. Yeah.
no drug could stop it. Like sure, give him Valium and like nothing happens.
No way. Okay.
So
Wow.
the storms were the kicker, and the storms were what really they destroyed his body. And so
Wow.
he passed away November 12th of 2011.
Okay. And then what's his
So
birthday then? So
his
exactly
birthday's
how old?
June 10th, 2008. So he's 3.5.
Okay. Wow.
So
Um, and he
that's my
was in,
story.
yeah, so he went to the hospital when? Like what was that?
September
September.
26th. Uh-huh.
Okay. And you had a newborn baby. So let's go back
No,
to,
he was a year and a half at this point because we
Oh,
had
he
lived with my
was.
mom for a whole year before. Like Victory Morgan was 2 when we first moved there, and I had a brand new baby, and then we were there for, over a
Okay.
year before
Okay.
the pool accident happened.
That's
Yeah.
right. Like, let me get it straight. So, did your mom just step in and take care of, like, how did you balance that? Let's go back to balance, I guess. How did you balance having, another
Oh,
toddler
well,
essentially at home?
yeah, so he came to the hospital a lot, but I had my mom and I also had my mother-in-law. Um, she came from Portland, and between my mother-in-law and my mom, they're both like really powerful women.
Oh, that is
So,
so
yeah,
amazing.
so
Yeah.
they helped a lot, but
Okay.
also like, I mean, my son was at the hospital a lot. And what's crazy is he was like 18 months old, but he
Uh-huh.
still has memories from it. Like he
Does he?
remembers like the day my mom brought him this train to play with at the hospital. And I just think, that's crazy. But I think, it's
Yeah.
like, it just kind of shows you how traumatic experiences affect us, even when we're toddlers.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so
Very
I
much
think that's
so.
why he remembers it, is just because it was super traumatic. And
Yeah.
I am grateful because, you have this thought as a mom, like none of my other kids are gonna know their brother.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
thought is like hurts, and so for my True to remember his brother is like, I feel like it's a tender mercy.
Absolutely. And but it's unfair. I feel like, that you have this amazing little boy and yeah, the rest of the kids don't get to know
Oh,
him the way that you did. But I'm sure I'm assuming you've, I don't know, kept him alive just by, I mean, I don't know. How did you, I don't know, share the story with your kids? Just like gradually, eventually, how did that
you know what?
happen?
Honestly, it's like you never really left.
Okay, I love it. I love that.
Like, and you know what? I think that's been like a huge coping mechanism for me too. I mean, don't get me wrong. I ugly wailed, cried, I think every morning for like a year. I
Mhm.
actually,
Mhm.
I have this painting. Let's see if I can show it to you. That's just behind you. Let's see. No, I'll put my palette down. I did all of these paintings like right after my son died.
Did you? Okay. I love it. Oh, wow.
Can you see these drip lines? I don't know if you can see
Let me
them,
see.
but
Oh,
there's these
yes.
little
Yes.
squiggly lines.
Uh-huh.
I would
Yes.
I would take like black paint and I would just drip it across the canvas and I would just watch it like fall and just cry. And like
And
somehow
that,
it was like it felt like the painting was like commiserating with me.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so don't get me wrong, like we went through the ringer emotionally. It's like every time you go to put makeup on in the mirror and it's like you can see your little 3-year-old there being like, Mom, we have the same green eyes, and you're just like,
Oh,
can't put makeup on.
yep.
But
Yep.
I will say, like, he is like never left in the sense that like I talk about him every day. Like I don't think like a day goes by that he's not mentioned.
I
And that
love
in a
that.
very real way, like he's here in my studio sometimes. He's definitely been with me with American Ninja Warrior. He just he's here and he's I feel like he's still very much a part of our team. He's
I
just on the
love
other
that.
side.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
actually had this experience. So we lived in Tucson for 2 years. My husband graduated school and he got hired by Intel in Chandler. So we lived in Gilbert. And
Okay.
um
Uh-huh.
and we bought our first home and had 2 floors, and I had my third son. His name's Honor, and
Oh my gosh, I love
he
these names.
he was the kind of baby that if you left the room, he fell apart, right?
Oh,
And
yes.
even like
Yes.
even like, I think he was over a year old, and it was like I would put him down, and if I had to run upstairs to do something, he would just like he's like
Just
I was gone.
devastated.
I was gone
How
forever.
could
And honestly though, that kid, he's like such a feeler. And I I had this realization even like 10 years after, like just recently, that he was conceived in my grief. Like
Okay.
he was growing inside me while I was getting up and wailing and ugly crying in my studio. Like he was being
Wow.
developed while his mother was experiencing like the deepest grief of her life.
I
And
love that.
it's actually been scientifically proven that the baby feels the emotions of the mother.
I
And
believe it. I
so
totally do.
he was born a sensitive kid, and he still is by far my sensitive, like most sensitive kid. And so I guess that also adds to some perspective, like why he cried like every time I
Yeah.
left the room.
Yeah.
But
That does. Wow.
crazy, huh? Crazy to think about.
Yeah. Yes, it
But
is.
I remember one day I ran upstairs to get the laundry and I was going to fold it downstairs, and I come down with the laundry basket and he's crying, and I kneel down and I was like, "Honor, baby, like you don't have to cry. Like I was just upstairs." And
Yeah.
then like in the moment I said that, it was my son was right next to me and he was like, "Mom, you really don't need to cry. Like I'm just upstairs."
Oh, oh my gosh, Jenedy. That is so beautiful. Wow.
No, I
Oh,
know. And so
yeah.
he has been just upstairs, and it's not like he's here next to me all the time, but I definitely have come to, and this is the thing as a mother, my son is a different being than he was when he was a 3-year old, right? Like
Right.
I believe that he is now like basically a mature spirit,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
coming to know him in that form, it's like you have to get to know your son like again. But
Yep. In
now
a
it's
different
been long
way.
and right, but it's been long
Yeah.
enough now that like I recognize him when he's around. And so it's so beautiful because, he kind of gets to check in. And
Yeah.
anyways,
I love
so
that.
that I think, and I think, my kids have had experiences too. Um
Have they? Oh,
and because that's one thing you pray as a mom is it's like, please help my kids to know their brother. And he's a big part.
I
He's a
love
big
that.
part.
That is so great. Do you do any, birthdays or
Yeah, like
for him or celebrations in that way?
yeah, his birthday's June 10th, so we just had his birthday, and
Yeah.
he loved hamburgers. That was like he lived and breathed for hamburgers. So we'll go and get Happy Meals together. Everybody,
Oh,
even if you're an adult, you order the Happy Meal and you get
you're
the
getting the
toy.
Happy Meal that day. I love it.
Uh-huh.
I
But then
love
also
it.
like my son passes away in November of 2011, and in February of 2012 I find out I'm pregnant. And it's funny because
Yes.
like I looking back, I think, did I intentionally do that? And I think it was more of like I knew I wanted to have more kids and we didn't know how long it would take. And I
Yeah.
got pregnant like right away.
Wow.
Um, and he was supposed to be born in October, but surprise, he came at 33 weeks and he was born in August.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
So,
Okay. Yes.
so it hasn't even been a year, and I'm back in the hospital with a little boy in the NICU. And I remember like when I
Wow.
went into labor thinking like it's too soon. I'm gonna go to the hospital and I went to like Mercy Gilbert, and I'm like,
Yeah.
they're probably gonna send me home and be like, oh, it's just, premature labor. And instead
Yep.
I got there and they're like, honey, you're an 8, you're having a kid like right now.
Oh, my
And then
goodness.
as soon as he was delivered, I literally held him for a second and they're like, oh, he's retracting. You could tell he was struggling to breathe. And so they took
Yep.
him away from me like right away.
I
How
don't
did
know what
those
that was.
balloons happen?
That happens sometimes. I don't know what that is. I'm not
They're like,
touching
they were like,
anything.
it was Honor's birthday. Balloons.
There you
Did you say
go.
somebody was born? Balloons.
I know. What? I'm going to have to ask the software what's going on when that happens, because that's happened in a couple of videos and sometimes it's not at the best time too.
It's okay. It's okay. So they took him away, and I remember just like the look on my husband's face, like when they take his son to the NICU, and we're just like, oh man, I was so mad. Like I remember writing in my journal because that's been a coping mechanism my whole life, but writing in my journal
Right?
like what did I fail to learn? Like God, like why are we back here? Like it has not
Right.
even been a year, and I'm back in the hospital. And when I was really spicy and angry like that with God, he really patiently said back to me, Jenedy, I gave you back a son as soon as I possibly could.
Wow.
And then you're like,
Like,
okay, I'm going to stop whining about it. And honestly,
Yeah.
we were only there 12 days. 12 days.
Wow.
With a baby that was born that early, like that's like nothing. So honestly,
Yeah.
he was in my arms before we hit the 1 year anniversary of my son falling in the pool. So before the
Oh
next
my goodness.
September 26th came, I already had honor, which I
That
think
is
like
like,
I know it's like it was such a
wow.
gift because like when that anniversary came, it's definitely softened when you have another gift from heaven in your arms, you know. But
Absolutely.
it's still I could feel it coming. Like and those that have been through grief know this that these anniversaries and these dates on the calendar, it's like you know they're coming and
Mm-hmm.
it's like a freight train and you can't stop it and you just have to just brace for impact, you know?
Is exactly. I love that analogy. Yes. That is so
So
true.
I like am about to brace for impact and thinking, how do I want to handle this day? And I thought you kind of have two options. One, ball your face off, be sad all day, have a giant pity party, or you could like be grateful for the children that you have and you could spend the day with them like you had one more day with your son. And we as a family titled it Kid Appreciation Day. And we
I
celebrate
love
it
that.
like all of my siblings, my nieces and nephews, we all celebrate Kid Appreciation Day in honor of my son. And my kids are usually pulled out of school and we usually gone to Lagoon, which is an amusement park here in Utah, or we'll just go, you know, we'll just go play. It's kind of like whatever they want to do, that's what we
Yeah.
do.
I love
And
that.
so yeah, that's kind of how we sorry, that was a long response to that simple question.
No, I'm so happy that you're
But
sharing all that. Oh my
yeah,
goodness, I love it. So let's go back to a little bit, just, those first, I don't know, like even that first year. I mean, there's no time frame or limit or anything, but talk a little bit about some of the just the ugliness, I don't know how it felt for you. And then a little bit like with your husband, did you learn through that how different people grieve even within a marriage? What was that like?
it's funny that you call it all the ugliness because it's like it was difficult, but I guess as an artist I see it as one of the most beautiful times of my life. Um
Wow.
because of the desperate like how close you feel to the Lord, like how much you reach for heaven because you got a kid on the other side, like you and it's beautiful. It's it's remarkably difficult, but it is beautiful.
I
Um,
agree with that. Yes.
yeah.
Very much.
But like I said, like I'm this journal girl, right?
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
why am I really a journal girl? Well, it's because when I was 10 years old, my mom told me that I could have like a personal relationship with God. And as a 10-year-old, you're like, seriously?
And you remember that?
Well,
I
yeah,
love that. I
because it
mean, I
changed
don't
my
know. I love
life.
that.
Because he said, Mom. And
Yeah.
we had this night where my mom gave each of us a journal and she challenged us to do three things every day to write in a journal, pray, and read from the Word of God. And she said if we did that every day, that we could build like our own personal relationship with him. And so as a little 10-year-old girl, like I started and it was really simple. It was like if you go back, I made my first journal entries. They're so cute. I actually love them because
Really? Oh,
well, it allows
oh.
you to connect with your 10-year-old self.
Yeah,
Like
that
it you
so
guys,
lucky.
you can time travel if you keep a journal. It's so crazy. I can go back to the night my husband proposed to me and I can read about it. And it's funny because you think you're going to remember these pivotal moments like so clearly because they were so
Right.
life changing, you'll never forget them. But like actually, you do.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So, anyways, so in my 10-year-old journal, I write about school starting and we went shopping for new clothes and I went to the fair in Boise, Idaho with my best friend. And it's all these like really simple things. And, you know, I even remember as a kid thinking like, this is how I build a relationship with like a deity that I can't see. This is it.
Wow.
And especially because like I would say prayers that were kind of the same every night. You know, it was kind of like,
Yep.
God, we had a great day today. Let's have another great day tomorrow. Thank you for my family. It was just like really
Or,
basic because you're a kid. You're a kid.
yeah. Yeah.
And when you read
Yeah.
and you read scripture and it's just like you read one verse and you're like, hey, we're good. We did it. We hit that
Yep.
box. And
Yep.
but then what happened is over time I think I was 14-ish when I encountered problems. Like my first real big problems.
Right.
And then
Right.
all of a sudden I'm not writing about jumping on the trampoline. I'm writing about like actually my heart hurts right now. And then when
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
pray, it's not just like had another great day. It was like, actually, I have a problem. And then when you read, it's like, did Jesus ever have this problem? You know, and suddenly this pattern that my mom taught me like took on like a whole new level. And honestly, it
Wow.
was this pattern that led me like my senior year when my family's moving to Colorado and my mom gives me the choice to stay in Utah and finish at my high school or move with
Yeah.
them. She's like, figure it out. And so what did I do? I did that. And then God told me to move. And then because of that move, I discovered art, you know, and then it's like
Yeah.
any big major life decision, any trouble, any problem. And over time, it was true. Like I actually did build a relationship with God because I could see his hand in my life like so clearly. And so what did I
Yeah.
do when I was in the hospital for 7 weeks? I wrote in my journal, I filled 2 journals in 7 weeks. I
Did you?
I have it all documented. Every storm, like the things the doctor said, like my hopes, my prayers, it's all there. A drawing. I did a drawing. Do you want to see it? Oh my gosh, I did a
Yes,
drawing.
please.
I will.
Please.
We'll field trip over to the journal wall and I will show you because this
Yes.
is honestly, this is probably one of my most treasured pieces of art. And
Are you serious?
it's done in a journal with colored pencil because that's what I had, right? But
Yes.
I drew
Oh,
his portrait
no.
like 2 days before he passed
Jenedy.
away.
My goodness. My goodness. That hair too.
I
And
know
oh,
it's little, he looks like a little cherub.
he does. And he had
Yeah.
green eyes like you.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
So like
gorgeous.
that's what I did, you know, and things like I have this like this fortune from a fortune cookie from going to get food with my mom. And like getting
Yeah.
food is like the last thing you want to do when your son might not live, but you also
Right.
have to like also live. But I got this
Yep.
fortune in my cookie and it said, heroism is endurance for one moment more.
I am writing that down. I love that.
So,
I love that.
so what did I do in those in the ugly times? What did I do in those moments afterwards where I was so disappointed? I
You
did this.
you
You know,
wrote.
and what I love about it though is like I feel like in a lot of faith organizations they talk a lot about prayer and they talk a lot about scripture, but I don't hear a lot of people being like, you know what, you really need to write. You know,
No,
like
no, exactly.
it's not preached. And I think man, it's the synthesis. It's where like all the things that you pray about and it's where the things that you study and how do they apply to my life and how does this offer me strength and power? It like all comes together in the writing, you know? And I think about like the scriptures. Would we have them if John didn't keep a record? If Matthew didn't keep
Right.
a record? If David didn't keep a record? Like no. What are we reading?
Right.
We are reading journals.
It's so
So
true.
like
Yeah.
of course we should journal. And this is the thing
Oh,
too, is that like, I don't think God just wants to see us at our best selves. You know, in fact, I think it's in those ugly times. That's why they're so beautiful is because we have no choice. Like we're so raw. Our life, we are so raw that we have no pretense. Like we are our most real selves before God in those times,
yes.
you know, because any
Yes.
pretense is taken away.
Right.
And so I
hmm
showed up every day, but I showed up broken and I showed up mad and I showed up disappointed, like telling God, you know, you really disappointed me. Like you super disappointed me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that you know better than I do because that's the thing. Because I had this relationship with him for like 15 years at this point,
hmm
it was like I couldn't just say there isn't a God, he doesn't love me. If there was a God, he wouldn't allow this to happen to me. No, I already knew there was a God, and I already knew that
Yeah.
he knew who I was. And so I couldn't I couldn't deny him, and I couldn't walk away. I just had to show up mad because I had to show up because I knew too much, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
and so I would show up, and this is the thing, like our God is, I think he wants us to show up like that, you know, like he wants us to come to him and say, listen, I have this big problem. Like,
Yeah.
or I am so hurt right now, or I am so messed up. Like he wants us to have prayers like that because it's only then that he can actually start to help us, you know?
Yes, I
Because
agree.
he won't
Hmm.
force you to change. He can't take the grief from you. You have to
No.
offer it to
Oh,
him. Like
right.
C.S. Lewis, going back to Lewis, he wrote a book called The Great Divorce, which is one of
Uh-huh.
I think one of the lesser known writings of Lewis. But he basically William Blake wrote a book called The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, and then C.S. Lewis's kind rebuttal was called The Great Divorce. Because like William Blake's kind of saying like it doesn't matter what you do, like the marriage of heaven and hell, like we're all just gonna end up okay, basically. And then C.S. Lewis was like, no, there is a heaven and a hell, and I'm gonna write the Great Divorce about it.
I
And
love it.
and in the book, it's actually just a story. It's not like a philosophical book. It's a story. But in the story,
Okay.
C.S. Lewis like wakes up in hell, and then every day in hell, this bus from heaven comes, and the souls in hell have the opportunity to go to heaven. Which I love this concept because I really don't believe in a God that's like, actually, you had your chance. Sorry. I believe in a
I
parent
don't
that's like,
either.
at any time, any moment in the course of eternity that you decide that you want to change, I'm here for it. Right. So the
100%.
problem is most of the ghosts in hell never make it to heaven because they fight with each other just standing in the queue to get on the bus, you know, and they're like, if
Yeah.
this is the kind of riffraff that's going to that side, I don't even want to go anymore, you know, things like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
so anyways, but it's a story of all these ghosts from hell having experiences with spirits in heaven. It's so beautiful. And one in particular that stayed with me is there's this man that's totally being ruled by this lizard on his back. And the lizard, you know, you could imagine him kind of like walking around like with his hunched shoulders, and the lizard's whispering things to him all the time about how he's like a victim and like, you know, and there's nothing he
Yeah.
can do to change. And he's sitting on this bench, and then this angel from heaven comes and is like, I can take that lizard from you, but I can't take it. You have to give it to me. You have to give me permission. I can't just grab it. And then the lizard's like, I'm all you've ever had. You'll be nothing without me, you know?
Yeah,
And it kind
yeah.
of reminds me, like with grief, I feel like there is this very real temptation from the adversary that says, if you're not sad every day for the rest of your life, then you have forgotten him. Then you
Right,
don't even
right.
love him anymore, you know?
Yes,
And
yes.
so in this story with Lewis, I see this like parallel. And eventually the ghost from hell gets up the courage to say, okay, just take it, just take it. And so like the angel like grabs the lizard and he pulls it from his back, and the lizard's like burning and writhing in the hands of the angel. But
Yeah.
then the lizard is transformed into a stallion, and the ghost rides
Oh,
that stallion into heaven. And so it's this really
beautiful.
beautiful analogy of like our weaknesses becoming our strengths, right? But for me, having been through grief, I see this beautiful parallel that like you've got this lizard on your back, and you can either be ruled by it your whole life, like I'm a victim of this terrible thing happened to me, and so everything that I do is affected by it, you know, and
Yep.
or you can give it over to God, and he can transform it into a beautiful catalyst for you to do amazing things, you know.
I love that. Oh my gosh, I
And
love that.
yeah, and so like this synthesizing of my grief, this writing about it and processing it and taking it to the Lord, and now it's been almost 13 years, right? And like
Yeah.
he has totally transformed it into a stallion for me. And I feel like, you know, sometimes I remember right after writing, like, I know that Jesus Christ is the healer of our souls. Like, I know that intellectually because I've read it and I believe it, but like, this is like the great, this is like this isn't like a little wound with like a band-aid. Like this is like disastrous proportions here. And like, I didn't know. I didn't know if that gap could ever be closed. And I actually have heard people say, like, you'll never be whole in this life, you know? And,
Whoa.
and,
Oof.
and so I just took the not knowing and I took where I was in the Grand Canyon with me and I gave it to the Lord. And then over time, I found out that actually the atonement of Jesus Christ is powerful enough to bring the Grand Canyon together. You know, I mean, if he parted the Red Sea, he can surely bring the Grand Canyon together. And
Absolutely.
but he doesn't stop there. Like the mending of the gap, that's like that's just like the base, right? Like the baseline. But what's so
Right.
beautiful is you bring in this and he'll mend, but then if you let him, he will just continue to build and to grow and he'll transform you into being that you never thought was possible for yourself.
I love
And so
that. Yeah.
that's totally, I mean, I look at my life and I look at the studio years ago when I'm painting in like whatever random apartment bedroom we have or whatever, like that one day I'd have my own studio. Like people come here and they're like, "Oh my gosh, is this your house?" And I'm like, "No, this is just my studio." And they're like,
Whoa, whoa,
"Wait,
whoa.
you
Really?
yeah. Yeah, this is my
Oh my
studio.
gosh, Jenedy.
It's a beautiful magical place if you ever come visit."
No, I'm coming. I'm coming to visit.
Okay, okay, okay.
I'm
But
taking you
like
to lunch and we're going to check out the studio.
we don't know what we're capable of, you know? Like, and I tell people this all the time. People be like, "Oh, Jenny, where does all your confidence come from? Like, you believe in yourself so much." And I want to say, "No, I don't. I actually know what I'm capable of. I like had no art talent whatsoever when I started this art journey, and pretty much everything has come as I've partnered with God. Like I would have never been a ninja. No, never in a million years. But that's just another thing that God like put in my path. And so I tell people,
Right.
listen, you come to know God, you build that relationship with him, and he teaches you who you are. He introduces you to yourself because guess what? He knows you a lot better than you do, you know? So if
That's
you
so
just
true.
focus everything on like, I'm going to try to get to know him and build this relationship. And then in return, he builds you without ever, like, you'd ever really intended it, but it happens. And it's so beautiful.
Wow. That is very well said and beautiful. Wow, Jenedy. Okay, so I want to clarify when I say ugliness of, grief can be physical,
Over.
like it
It
can
is.
hurt physically. But there is a difference. You're exactly right. There's a spirit that is present when your child dies. And I've always equated it to similar to when they're born. That spirit when they're born and you bring that sweet baby home, there is just this I don't know, beautiful feeling in your home when this new baby arrives and is there and they're so close to heaven, and I feel that is so similar to when they also die. That same type of spirit is just so sacred and beautiful. And I just couldn't agree with you more on that. But I guess what I refer to is just the ugliness of the physical pain that grief can cause. And because for me, I hadn't experienced anything like that at all ever. I was not, I don't know, familiar. I wasn't comfortable. I hated that. I hated how that felt. It was ugly to me feeling that way. And I tried to avoid it and get away from it as much as I could. I just have to only compare to what I know, my own personal story. But I want to know, just I don't know, and how you, I don't know, and I can see, so I know how you helped yourself through it, or how God helped you through it with just writing. I think that is so inspiring. I am so inspired now. I just want to I have so many journals that are a few pages, and then the rest of it's empty, and then
That's
years later I'll
okay.
get a new one and the rest are empty, and it's like, yeah, I can't go back now. I definitely can't go back, but I can relate to thinking, my granddaughter said the cutest thing the other day, and I will always remember that. No, I know I won't. I won't. And I need to write
So
these things
sad.
down. when they say these most adorable things. But
Well,
so yeah, go ahead.
I also realized that you asked me about like my husband and our relationship and how did that,
Yeah.
how did we grieve differently and stuff. And I didn't really answer that question because I was telling you other things.
Well, let's go into it
But
then.
but I will say that it was hard, and it is hard, and I know that it can feel ugly in the moment too. Like when your face is so swollen from crying, that's not pretty. It's
Right,
it's
right.
it's like when I go on road trips and you see a storm from far away and it's so beautiful. But when you're in it, it's scary, right? Like you see it from far away and it's so pretty, and then all of a sudden you're like driving through it and you're like, this is scary.
Yeah,
Like I might go up the road,
yeah,
but I can't really see because it's raining so hard, you know? And so yeah, like totally in the moment, horrifying. But
yeah.
it's so it's good to know that in the future it gets really beautiful from far away.
Right,
And
yeah,
and my husband grieved so differently than me. And it was so hard because he was in grad school. He was getting an MBA when his son was fighting for his life. Like,
right.
and he had to
Yeah,
have a job. He had to have a job at the end of all of this because we might have a special needs kid that was going to need all the care, you know?
right. Yeah,
And so he really, I think about him in that situation and think, how the crap did he do that? Like, how did he not withdraw from school? Like, how did he do it? I
right.
don't know, the grace of God. But I also think for him
Wow.
in the months after, it does become like a beautiful distraction, right? Like something to pour your attention to, something to not fully embrace the things that you're feeling, you know?
Yeah, yep, for
And
sure.
then like as soon as we moved to Gilbert, he started taking boxing classes because he told me he felt like he just needed to go beat the crap out of something and then maybe he might feel a little
Right.
bit better.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, like we definitely like coped in different ways. And dude, there were years like I want to say even like 5 years after the
yeah,
fact that, my husband had kind of like emotionally just shut down. I think
yeah, yeah,
I think because that's how he coped. Because he and my son had a very special bond. They were just, oh man, he just loved that kid so deeply, and so
yeah,
we kind of reached this point in our marriage when I was like, I feel like I feel like you're emotionally dead to me, dude. Like, and it kind of was, and
yeah,
so,
yeah.
and you think, man, this is 5 years after the fact. Like
Right.
you
Yeah,
always think like, oh, in a year, in 2 years, and you think, could I really have like still so much major work to do 5 years later? Yeah. And so we had to just kind of recognize what it was, recognize that our relationship needed healing, and we had to work on it. And I had to be like, hey, I need you to like, maybe we could just, I mean, I know you're really busy and stuff with work, but maybe we could just text while you're at work every day. Like just something that we're like connecting more,
yes,
and not just
yeah.
like going through the routine of. And then I also think that like a gift was we discovered rock climbing together at the same time.
Oh, I love
And
that.
this was about, man, we discovered rock climbing like 7 years after the fact.
Yeah, hey,
Dude,
hey.
here's the thing, you guys, everything takes time. Everything takes time. Like I think about like your physical body, people think like, I did a 6-week program. Why am I not jacked right now? Why did I not lose 20 pounds? I worked on this for 6 weeks. And I feel like telling them, oh, sweetheart, you just need to repeat that for like 5 years and then you'll be good.
Yeah,
Like it
yes,
just
yes.
our physical change is so slow. So should we expect that like we can spiritually grow and or change that quickly? No. So yeah,
Right. That's
7
so
years after
true.
the fact, my husband and I started rock climbing together, and it's been so good. Because
Yay.
in rock climbing you have to have someone belay you. Like
Right.
somebody's on the wall, and especially when you're outdoors climbing, it's like the stakes are higher and you just really have to trust the person that's got you like on the ground. And
Yeah.
I think it's been, it's like our thing that we do together, and I love it, and we do it. We
Yay.
actually now like travel the world to different rock climbing destinations. We've like been to Greece
No.
and Canary Islands and Puerto Rico, all these places just to climb outside.
No way.
Yeah.
Yay.
Um,
Just the two
but
of you
yeah,
go.
we internationally, but then we had taken our kids with us into Idaho in the City of Rocks, incredible climbing. And we were just there actually like
Wow.
last week, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So anyways, like, I guess with the marriage thing, it's like I had to leave space for him. And I know people have said this, but you really do need to leave space for him to take all the time that he's going to take to heal. And it
Yeah.
might take 7 years. And so you just have to be like, am I good? Am I willing to be here for him for like the next 7 years? Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And find
And
find that thing that can build a bridge for you two, like
yeah,
the
like
rock
build a
climbing
bridge.
did. And
Yeah, and even at one point, we even tried passing a journal back and forth. I think that's a really good thing too, because
oh,
like if you, again, writing, but like if you write,
yeah, yeah,
it's like it gives you space to just say everything that you need to say without a rebuttal, without anything coming back at you. And then you get to receive all of that before you respond. And I just think, yeah, if there's couples out there that are struggling, just to try it, because I feel like it just allows you to really be said and then gives the other person time to process before they respond instead of just like a,
yeah, like the
quick
Marco Polo
response.
app, but for writing. Okay, I love that. Okay, I have one question, and this is for other people who, there's always people that want to know how they can help somebody that has, gone through something really difficult like that. What is there anything that anybody said, did, or offered to you during like your darkest of days that you just remember as being, meaningful or helpful, something like that?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that come to mind. One was the day after my son died, a girl in my neighborhood came over with bags of clothes, new clothes. She had heard that I wanted to wear white to my son's funeral instead of black. And she knew that my family, so I have a sister and I have two sisters-in-law and my mom, that we were all going to the funeral. And so she had just bought all of these new white dresses, skirts, tops. Like she didn't know
Oh
what size we really were or what we would really like. So she just brought literally like two big bags just full of brand new white clothes that she had just guessed on our size so that I
yeah,
could wear something new and white to my son's funeral.
I
And
have the chills.
I,
Wow.
so I still have
Wow.
that dress, skirt.
Do you?
And
Yeah.
I just,
Yeah.
I mean, that will like probably go down in history as like, for me, like one of the kindest things, like most thoughtful things that
So
anyone's ever done
thoughtful.
for me. Yeah.
Yes.
But then also
Wow.
just like, honestly, just sitting with somebody and letting them cry. Like I remember I was living in Gilbert and had just been, it was in that like year, 2 years since he had passed away. And a friend came over one day and I was going through some boxes and like I found my son's underwear, like his
Oh,
little
yeah.
Thomas the Train, learning how to go like potty training underwear.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect it. I just found it and they literally fell apart.
Floodgates
Like a
opened.
pair of underwear. And she was coming over to have like a play date with her kids and she like opened the door and I was just like, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "This underwear." And then I just wept and she just held me, and
Oh,
it seems like, oh, I
yeah.
should do something for her. No, literally just hold her and let her cry. Like that's
Yeah.
really great. Yeah.
And don't try to fix it.
I don't try to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
then
love
the
that.
third thing that I would say is if you know somebody that's been through loss and they're really close to you and you want to support them, put the date on your calendar. Just go into your phone. On iPhone, you can set like a reoccurring date
Yep.
and reach out to them like a year later. Because
Right.
one thing that really was hard for me was when all the flowers died. And um and then like people just go back to their life. And
Right.
it's fine. It's not like you expect people to like be sad and mourn with you for a whole year or whatever, but it's just
Right.
hard because I remember like looking out the window and seeing like a neighbor bringing in her groceries and just being like, wow, look at her. She's just like, she's bringing in the groceries like nothing's happened. And like
Yeah.
my whole world is like forever changed, you know?
Stuck. Yeah, for a
And
minute.
and
Like,
so like people that would reach out 6 months later, like if you're going to give a gift, don't give it to them right then. Like buy it or whatever, but just like put it in your closet and then put a note in your phone 6 months, 9 months, a year later, because
yep.
that's for me, like that's when I needed the most support because
Yep.
the support leaves. And honestly, when it first happens, I was like in this, like, I call it like spiritual morphine. Like God had me on this, like some kind of spiritual painkiller drip. And then for
100%.
me,
Yep.
and so you're a little bit numb. And then it was like, for me, about 6, 9 months later, that God was kind of like, okay, we're going to start to wean you off of this. And that's when I was like, oh my gosh. That's when you feel everything like so deeply, you know? And so
Oh,
if I had a
yes.
friend that would show up then, you know, when they
Right.
think that like I'm somehow okay now,
Yep.
that's when I
When you're
need you.
just putting on a
Yeah.
good face and being
Yeah.
tough for the crowd. And
You could do it with a broken
oh,
heart.
I love that. And it's so relatable. It's so relatable. I just, wow, Jenedy, thank you so much you have such beautiful insight and just a beautiful way of describing things. And I don't know. I love it. I'm so inspired now on a lot of
Oh,
different fronts. And I just so appreciate your insight and your testimony. Like, just so appreciate it. And your time. I so appreciate your time. But I am coming to visit you and to see that
oh,
studio and
okay.
to at some point we'll set it up. But
Okay.
I am now very curious as to that beautiful studio that you paint in. Well, I think that I will let you go and get back to your beautiful art that you are creating at this moment. And I'm just so glad that, I have a new friend. So whether you
Yeah.
like it or not, you're my new friend.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds good.
oh, okay. Well, I'm going to sign off and you have a beautiful day.
You too. Talk to you later.
Hey listeners, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you felt encouraged and gained some insight. If you want to hear more inspiring stories, make sure to subscribe and don't forget to check out the website at pieces2peace.net. If you or someone you know has a story you'd like to share, send an email to heatherstephen@pieces2peace.net. Until next time, keep moving forward.